301 and it being dead and reintroduced, that was something that extended beyond 2021? Is that what they were talking about?
So what we passed in 2000, that goes to 2021.
Right.
Schapiro, and that is voter protected. We have a provision in our Constitution that says anything the voters pass from the year 2000 on, the legislature can't touch it unless they get a 3/4 vote in both chambers and they further the intent of the law, right? So they can't touch the 301 money until July 1st of 2020.
Right. But they were talking about that it was kind of dead in the house, and then when we came on the scene, it was revived. So what was revived? Expending it beyond 2021?
So they already passed extending it beyond 2021. That's already been signed by the governor.
Okay.
But they did it legislatively.
Right. And they did it within these last few days?
They did it in the last few months.
Okay.
They did it about a month and a half ago or so.
Okay.
They could theoretically undo that, but nothing would happen until July 1st of 2020.
Okay.
But if they undo that, that's a real kick.
That is a real kick, but the good news is between now and then we'll have a new legislature and we'll have 2 elections that we could actually permanently renew it if we had to. But there's nothing they can do today to take away 301 money for next year or the year after that.
Okay.
That money is safe.
Can we revisit what we want today?
Well, I mean, so today obviously the bills are already gone through committee and they're on the floor now. So we're talking about the budget for this coming fiscal year, for fiscal year 19. And
where the money is coming from.
Where the money is coming from is the most interesting part. So one of the things that we do not like about the language they have is that they're disproportionately going to impact low-income communities by essentially spreading out desegregation funding. So folks like Tucson Unified, Tempe Elementary School District, a lot of folks in Phoenix are going to feel the hit on their property taxes, on their tax bills. So that's really sad and unfortunate. The other piece is that when you look at the rosy revenue projections that he's using to pay for this, that's not a good way of budgeting. The Republicans in the legislature really criticized Dan Napolitano for doing the same thing when we did full-day kindergarten, which we then later lost when revenues went back down. And so there's a fear of what could happen with that when you just use rosy revenue projections. I was at a meeting last week on Thursday, actually, the day we marched from Chase Field down here. I then marched up to North Central Phoenix here, Uptown Phoenix, where they have an ADE office, and was in a meeting with the folks at the Department of Education. They did a presentation from the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. These are folks that work for him. And he was talking about rosy revenue, and someone in the meeting asked, is that how he's planning to pay for teacher raises? And the person from the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity said that he would not want to peg something as critical as education funding to something as unpredictable as economic trends. So this is someone who works for the governor who is criticizing his way of funding the teacher pay increases. The other big concern that we have about this budget is that the teacher pay increases, it is restricted to their definition of teacher, which is a teacher with a classroom roster. And that is a very narrow definition.
And I'm still not considered a teacher.
Yeah, well, their definition is so narrow. Are you an elementary school educator?
I'm a pre-K, certified pre-K.
Yeah, it's very narrow. It's K through 12 classroom rosters.
Who came up with that?
The guy who works up there on the 8th and 9th floor. That's how they came up with it last year, and they're just recycling that definition.
Right.
So,
are you saying
Governor Ducey? Are you saying
who do
Governor
you do it
Ducey,
with? Like, how can we fight that? Those of us that are not considered teachers, and we are.
So this is a great question. How do we fight the governor's definition of what it means to be a teacher, and how do we fight against what they're doing in this legislature right now that's not meeting our needs? And the answer is, after this budget passes, it is going to bring some more money into our schools. We can't deny that, but we need to consider that step one, because after this passes, our schools next year will still have $700 million less than they had 10 years ago. We will have countless educators in our school system that will not be getting the raises that will be going to their definition of classroom teacher. We will still have the worst counselor to student ratio in the nation, 924 students per counselor. We would have to decrease that ratio by 165 students in order to get out of last place and pass California. So there's still a lot of work to do. So here's step two. Step two is November. We have this initiative. If you have not signed the Invest in Education initiative, you can do so right here at our tent. There's folks circulating around the event with clipboards. Sign that petition. What that will do is it will set income tax rates for the highest income tax bracket. People households who make more than $500,000 a year, or individuals who make more than $250,000, it'll just set their tax rates basically back to what they were in the 1980s. Before these guys started doing some tax giveaways, they're gonna vote for it. It's gonna pass. We're gonna get on the ballot, and it's gonna pass. I'm telling you right now, it's gonna pass.
So that's the answer to the question: where does the money come from?
So that will bring $690 million back into our school system. If this budget passes and the initiative passes, it puts us back where we were in 2008. It's not going to make us one of the best funded states in the nation, but it'll at least get our funding back to where it was in 2008 as a starting point. But the other thing we have to do in November, we cannot just focus on funding. We have to have leaders in this state who are going to fight for our public schools. And so you've got to look at your legislators in your districts and see how they've been voting. Look at their records. The AEA puts out letter grades for each legislator. Look at their letter grades. Decide if you think this governor has been supportive or not of our public school system. And right over there in that building, at the head of the Department of Education, is a superintendent of public instruction who instead of supporting our public school educators has been threatening them in recent weeks. We have not had an educator in that job in 24 years. And that's why I'm running to unseat Diana Douglas. So, step one, we tried to get as much as we could out of this budget, and I think this is as much as they were willing to give us. And so step two is November. We got to get this initiative on the ballot. We got to get it passed, and we have to elect leaders who are going to support our students in our public school system. That's right. We got to keep this going. Hey, everybody, walk-ins tomorrow. Make sure to be at your walk-ins at your neighborhood schools tomorrow to show that this movement continues. Any other questions I can answer for folks?
Yeah, Can you explain a little bit for people who don't know all the other positions that exist in schools besides classroom teachers and what that sounds like and what that looks like?
So other than our classroom teachers, of course in schools we have lots of other critical folks. We talked about school counselors. We talked about school librarians who are also certified teachers, instructional aides, all of our folks in special education, speech-language pathologists who are working directly with our students. We have classified folks. We have folks like custodians. We have bus drivers, paraprofessionals, attendance clerks, receptionists. None of these folks are going to get a raise under this budget. That's why we got to get this initiative passed in November. 60% of it is reserved for base salaries for educators, but the other 40% goes to our classified staff, and it goes to fix our crumbling infrastructure in our school system.
So several districts use private companies to put substitutes in classrooms to fill teacher vacancies. This has been going on for years. You want to speak a little bit to that happening? I mean, is that kind of a stopgap measure?
So our students deserve a very high bar for educators. You know, in a lot of professions, people are saying, well, you know, when you have not enough folks there to do the job, in most other professions, they just raise the salary to attract and retain good people. But in Arizona, we have lowered the bar, and we can't keep lowering the bar. You all might be aware of last year a bill passed called SB 1042 that says essentially anybody with a pulse can now get a teaching certificate in Arizona. And by the way, they can renew that certificate for up to 12 years. That is not acceptable. Our students deserve professionally trained educators in their classrooms. And so we've got to make sure to keep that high bar for certification. And as state school superintendent, I'll be in charge of the certification unit at the Department of Education. And we got to make sure that we have the best educators getting certified and getting out in the classrooms. And that's going to take competitive wages. Right now, a K-8 educator can move to any other state in the country and get a raise. And that's ridiculous. I have a kindergartner and second grader at home, and my kids and your kids deserve professional educators in their classrooms. Highly qualified, absolutely. Any other questions I can answer for you guys?
I have a question. So with that law allowing any teacher with a pulse to be in the classrooms, does that have to be repealed to change that? Would they have to vote on that again?
I'll tell you what, so SB 1042 is law right now. If you want to eliminate that law, it would require the legislature voting to eliminate it. But my plan right now, I mean, we will have an election for superintendent in November. I will hopefully be sworn into office in January as our state school superintendent. I will not issue certifications to unqualified people, and they can come after me. They can come after me if they want to, but we need certified educators who are qualified, who are highly qualified. And you know what? If they want to come after me, for not putting unqualified people in classrooms, they can do it.
I got a question on that one.
Yeah.
I have a master's degree in business, a writing degree. I've been in Arizona classrooms for 4 years. I have thousands of hours of being with kids.
Yeah.
Arizona Department of Education still, as of last week, says I'm not a qualified person to be with kids.
Yeah.
So can you rectify, is this a philosophy problem? Is this a metrics in the department
there are
problem?
various requirements to get a certification, a traditional certification before 1042 in Arizona. You have to have a certain number of credit hours of education courses. You have to pass Arizona and U.S. Constitution classes. You have to get a fingerprint clearance card, which obviously you have if you've been in the classroom. You do those things, and you have jumped through the hoops that most teachers in this country have to jump through to become an educator. You do those things, you should get a certificate. As far as teaching in the classroom, the way it used to be, you had to have at least, you had to either have done student teaching or taught in a classroom as an emergency certified educator, which is, I'm assuming, what you've been doing.
No,
If you do that for
nobody
2
emergency
years-
certs anymore.
Yeah, well, actually, a lot of people are emergency certified. A lot of school districts do. So if you've been an emergency certified teacher for 2 years, that counts as student teaching. That fills your student.
Well, and that's the kind of the heart of the question is my experience, and just speaking from one personal person, but I've yet to meet anyone who has been emergency certified, and I've been teaching for 4 years.
Yeah.
The districts haven't been
It
doing
might just
it.
be your district, but lots
No,
of
it's
districts
I work with a company that bounces between 5 districts. So I don't mean to make this all about me, but the point is, as of last week, given everything that's going on in this state, they're still saying nope. According to this line, no. Again, master's in business and a writing degree. Am I qualified to teach 6th grade English? Am I just a heartbeat?
I think our teachers should have some pedagogical training to be in the classroom, and so that used to be what our requirements were. That's not our requirements anymore. But I think it's important that people actually have pedagogical training to learn to teach if they're going to be in our classrooms. Yeah.
So what can
on a temporary emergency basis? I have no problem with someone like you. If it's a choice between no teacher and having a teacher, absolutely. But you know what? 1042 has actually gotten more teachers out of the classroom.
Why?
Because professional educators across the state are offended by the idea that you don't have to have pedagogical training to be a permanent teacher in a classroom. And so 1042 has actually lost us teachers. So I'm okay with having a high bar, but I'm also okay in emergency situations for a temporary period with having someone like you in the classroom. But I ideally want to have someone with pedagogical training in every classroom in this
Can you
state.
explain pedagogy to people who might not understand that, for people who are outside the system?
The teaching children is what pedagogy actually means. Andragogy is teaching adults. So training in how to teach children.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions I can answer for anybody? Anybody else have any other questions?
Okay. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.